Hello brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode here on Dangerous African Confessions HD. In this episode, we have the continuation of the conversation with our brother, who talks to us about his father and their prophet, where he made us to understand what secrets are there between his father and their prophet. Let us go into this to get the understanding of what our brother wants to share with us. Please subscribe if you haven't done so, and also do like and share this video, so others out there can also benefit from this conversation, and hit the notification bell as well, so you will be notified anytime we upload videos.
They told me that to reach the next level of power, I had to offer something that had true meaning, something that would mark me as a true believer. I didn't understand it at first. The guardian was clear. He told me, to gain what you seek, you must give what you hold most dear. You must show the power you seek is more important than anything else in your life. Only then will you prove you are worthy. I didn't want to believe it. But I was desperate. I had been climbing the ladder, feeling that intoxicating rush of power, and I wasn't about to stop now. The first sacrifice, the one that would truly test me, was my mother. I had been taught to believe that no one could hold me back. Not my family, not my friends, no one. It wasn't about love. It was about power. And if love got in the way of that, then it had to be removed. I knew it would be hard. I thought about my mother constantly. I still remember how she used to smile at me when I was a kid, how she would try to protect me, always telling me that things would get better. She had no idea what I was becoming. She had no idea what I had already done. But the truth is, by the time I was asked to sacrifice her, I had already distanced myself from everyone. My ambition had consumed me. I had justified every other step I'd taken with the promise of success. Every decision I made, every ritual, had been for this moment. For the power. And when they told me to sacrifice her, I felt a sense of clarity. It was the next step. The only step. I remember standing in her living room, the room I grew up in, staring at her as she made tea in the kitchen. The weight of the decision felt unreal. But I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange calmness. A knowing. They told me that I had to be alone with her. That the ritual could only work if it was personal. I had to take her life in a way that felt intimate. The guardian's instructions were clear, I couldn't be seen. No witnesses. No one could question my loyalty. The darkness of the ritual was too strong, too consuming to let anyone else in. She had always been kind. But kindness doesn't matter when you're making the kind of sacrifice that will set you free. It doesn't matter when your life is on the line. And it didn't matter when I was finally standing behind her with the handkerchief in my hand. I only had to touch my mother with the handkerchief and the rest was history. She didn't see me. She was too busy with her tea, humming to herself. She didn't know the life I had already chosen. She didn't know that the love she had given me was about to cost her everything. It didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. The first one never does. But there's a rush. A dark rush. The moment the life fades, you realize that the world has shifted. That the thing you just took from another is now yours. So later in the day, I was told that she had fallen deeply sick all of a sudden. And she died just moments after getting to the hospital. The feeling was almost unbearable, an energy, a clarity, a sharpness that I had never experienced before. The hunger that had driven me for so long was finally satisfied, even if just for a moment. But it wasn't enough. I had learned the price of power, and it was higher than I ever imagined. And the hunger, it never went away. It only grew stronger. After her, there was more to give. More family to sacrifice. More blood to spill. I had to sacrifice others to truly claim my place at the top. My sister was next. Then it was my brother-in-law. Every ritual, every offering, tightened my grip on power, but it also started to take pieces of me, pieces of my humanity. At first, I didn't care. I thought I was in control. I thought I could handle it. But the more I gave, the more they demanded. That's the thing with power. You think you're in control, but it's never you who's calling the shots. And by the time you realize that, you're already too far gone. The last family member I had to sacrifice was my own daughter. She was only 5 years old at the time. The ritual had been set, the moment had come, and there was no turning back. She trusted me, loved me, and I took that from her in the most brutal way imaginable. I had become everything I swore I'd never be. A monster, but a monster with power. And at the moment of her death, I realized something I'd never truly understood before. The price was everything. You think you want power until you realize it consumes you. It starts as a whisper, a desire, something small that you think you can control. But then it grows. It spreads. And before you know it, it's a storm inside you, tearing everything apart. And you do anything to make sure that storm doesn't stop. Anything. At first, when I began the rituals, I didn't know how far they would take me. I didn't understand the true cost of the power I was seeking. But by the time the blood of my family had been spilled, I realized I was no longer just climbing the ladder of success, I had become the ladder. Every step I took brought me closer to the top, but the top kept moving further away, and the price of each step became more unbearable. What had begun as a hunger for control quickly turned into an insatiable thirst. It was no longer about just money or status, it was about being untouchable. About owning everything and everyone. The more I sacrificed, the more power I gained. And with that power came opportunities, doors opened for me, paths cleared, and I was always the one who walked through them first. It's funny how the world just seems to bend when you have power. Doors that were once closed to me, locked by people who thought they had it all, suddenly swung wide open. And I walked through them, not because I earned it, but because I took it. It wasn't long before I started to see the rewards of my efforts. I had always been smart. I had always been driven. But now I had something else, something that set me apart from every other businessman. I wasn't just negotiating deals or playing the game, I was reshaping it. The rituals I had gone through, the blood I had shed, had forged me into a force that couldn't be stopped. At first, it was small things. A successful business venture here, an acquisition there. I had learned how to use my new abilities to manipulate the stock market, to charm people into trusting me, to make decisions that others would never dare to make. But with each success, the hunger inside me grew. And I realized that I wanted more than just money. I wanted influence. I wanted to be the one who decided what happened. There's a moment when you realize that no one is safe. You stop seeing people as individuals and start seeing them as tools. You begin to understand that everyone is expendable, and anyone who stands in your way will eventually fall. That's when the game gets interesting. As I climbed higher, I learned to eliminate threats before they could even surface. People who were once my friends, my colleagues, they became obstacles. It was as if I could see everything they would do before they did it. I could predict their next move, their weaknesses, their fears. And when the time was right, I struck. Subtle at first, leaving others in the dark, watching them struggle. But there were moments when I didn't have to be subtle at all. There was one man who was an obstacle to a deal I was trying to secure. A businessman with connections, power of his own. He was a formidable opponent, but I could feel the weaknesses in his soul. He had a family, a wife he loved, children he cared for. And that's when I knew how to break him. I didn't take his life. No, that would have been too obvious. But I destroyed everything he cared about. I set up a series of calculated events, orchestrating his financial downfall and leaving him vulnerable. His wife was caught in a scandal, his son arrested for a crime he didn't commit. And as I watched his world crumble, I knew that I could have stopped it at any point. But I didn't. I let it unfold. The power of knowing that I could ruin someone's entire life, and that I had done it without them ever knowing it was me, that was a feeling unlike any other. It wasn't enough to win. I wanted them to suffer before they lost. I wanted them to know that their defeat wasn't just inevitable, it was crafted. I was no longer a businessman. I was a puppet master, pulling strings behind the scenes, and everyone else was just a marionette. The group, the order, had taught me well. They had shown me the way. But they also demanded more. And I gave it to them. Every deal, every acquisition, every calculated move was part of the bargain I had made with them. The power I wielded wasn't just mine, it belonged to them too. Success isn't just about the money, or the deals, or the victories. It's about control. It's about bending the world to your will until everything falls into place. And that's when you realize you've crossed a line. You're not just playing the game anymore. You are the game. I expanded my influence beyond business. I had connections in politics, law enforcement, even the media. I owned people without them knowing it. They were puppets, just like everyone else. With each new deal, I amassed more wealth, more power. But the true goal, true success, was always one thing, being untouchable. But there was one thing I couldn't control, the price. The price of all of this. I could have everything, but I lost myself along the way. Power is intoxicating. But in the end, it makes you weak. It makes you dependent on it. And when it's all you have, it's all you are. In all this, I had a friend. He was not a businessman like I was. But he was a prophet. And we belonged to the same group. He was a man with vision, and he was always different. While the rest of us were consumed with power, ambition, and control, he was focused. He saw things I couldn't. He understood the path we were walking, and unlike the rest of us, he knew where it led. He knew that the power we were gaining, the sacrifices we were making, came with a price. But like me, he couldn't escape it. Gabriel and I met in the early days, back when we were both still finding our way in the group. The other had already pulled me into its dark embrace, but Gabriel, a man with true insight, was different. He wasn't like the others who joined because they wanted wealth or influence. No, Gabriel had been chosen for something else. He was a prophet, a man gifted with foresight, or at least that's how they explained it to me. He could see the future. He could see what was hidden beneath the surface of the world, the forces that moved everything in secret, the patterns that most of us couldn't even comprehend. He had a unique connection to the occult forces that shaped the rituals we took part in, and he often gave cryptic warnings about the consequences of what we were doing. At first, I didn't take him seriously. To me, it was just a curiosity. A reminder that not everyone involved in the group was there for the same reasons. But soon, I realized he was more than just a prophet, he was a voice of truth. And truth. Truth was something I didn't want to hear. Gabriel's visions were undeniable. He would often speak of the cost of the power we were seeking, warning us that the price was far steeper than we had been led to believe. He spoke of darkness, of souls lost and damned forever. He told me that the very rituals that had given us control were the ones that would eventually break us, leaving us hollow and empty. But we never listened. I never listened. Power was too intoxicating. The group's influence was too vast, and Gabriel's warnings, though chilling, seemed distant, like a ghost trying to warn someone who didn't want to hear it. But over time, as I rose higher and higher, I began to notice the toll his words were taking on him. Gabriel started to change. The bright, insightful man I once knew became quieter, more distant. He would often isolate himself in the shadows, his eyes hollow with the burden of his own knowledge. I saw him struggle with the same darkness that consumed the rest of us, but where I reveled in the power, he recoiled from it. He warned me. He warned all of us. But I didn't listen. He said that power was never meant to be held by human hands. That to wield it, we would become like the very forces we invoked. He told me that the blood we spilled would not only stain our hands, it would stain our souls. One night, Gabriel pulled me aside after a ritual. We were in the quiet, empty room where the group gathered to discuss our most sacred affairs. I know what you've become, he said, his voice soft but heavy. I know the power you've gained, but you can't see it. You can't see the path you're on. The road you're walking, there's no coming back from it. And if you continue this way, you lose everything. You lose yourself. I laughed then, dismissing his words as the ramblings of a man who had become too attached to the old, naive notions of morality. I was hungry for more. More power, more influence. Gabriel's warnings felt weak, small, compared to the mountains I had built for myself. It wasn't long after that conversation that I began to see the toll Gabriel's involvement in the rituals was taking on him. He no longer participated in the dark rites the way he once had. His face became gaunt, his eyes tired, as though the very essence of his soul was being drained from him. I could feel the tension between us growing. While I was climbing higher, expanding my empire and sinking deeper into the darkness, Gabriel began to pull away. It was clear that the path he had chosen was no longer the same as mine. He wanted out, he wanted to abandon the group, abandon the rituals. But he was trapped. I watched him struggle, and I understood. He wasn't like us. He didn't want the power I craved. He wanted freedom. He wanted peace. But peace was never an option. Not for any of us. The deeper you go into that world, the less chance you have of getting out. Gabriel tried to leave the group, but as with all those who had tried before him, there was no leaving. No matter how hard he fought against it, the darkness had already claimed him. He had already paid his price by offering his very soul to the rituals, and the order didn't take kindly to those who abandoned their allegiance. The last time I saw him was in the final days before everything collapsed. Gabriel had become a shadow of himself, broken and defeated. His warnings had turned to desperate pleas, but by then, it was too late for him. Too late for anyone. I saw him in the end, not as the friend I once knew, but as a broken man. His eyes were no longer filled with visions. They were filled with despair. He had lost everything, even his own will to fight. And in the end, that was the fate of all of us who had touched the darkness. We would lose ourselves. It was inevitable. The day Gabriel disappeared, I knew something had changed. I wasn't sure what happened to him, whether he was taken by the order or consumed by the same darkness he had warned me about. But I knew this: Gabriel had been the last person who truly understood what we were doing. He had been the last person who had the courage to question it. And in the end, the darkness took him. Gabriel always had this air of purity about him, this quiet wisdom that I couldn't understand. I saw him as a kind of beacon in the group, someone untouched by the greed that consumed the rest of us. But what I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Gabriel's own rise to power wasn't so different from the rest of us. He had made his own sacrifices. And in the end, his sacrifice was more personal, more painful, than anyone could imagine. Looking back now, I see the signs clearly. Gabriel was never as unaffected as he appeared. He was a prophet, yes, but even he had to pay the price for the power he wielded. The visions he had, the ability to see the future, none of it had come without its own cost. It wasn't just a gift given freely by the darkness, it was a bargain. A bargain he made with blood, just like everyone else in the order. When we first began to work together in the group, Gabriel was already different from the others. There was an aura of mystery surrounding him. His ability to sense things, to know what would happen before it did, had already set him apart. But I soon learned that it hadn't always been this way. Gabriel hadn't been born with his gifts. They had been earned through sacrifice, just like the rest of us. I remember the day he told me about it. I had known him for years, yet he had never once mentioned his past. The moment he shared it with me, I could see the weight in his eyes. The truth behind the prophecy he so often spoke of. Gabriel's face was worn, the lines around his eyes deeper than I had ever noticed before. He had always been the calm one, the voice of reason, but that day, his demeanor was different. He seemed almost haunted. He told me that he wasn't always like this. He said he didn't always have these visions. This power. It was given to him in exchange for something. And that thing, he said, was someone he loved. I looked at him, intrigued but wary. Gabriel was the one who had always warned us about the price of power. I had never imagined that he, too, had paid such a price. He told me about his sister, Elena. She was younger than him, innocent, full of life, and someone he loved more than anything. But she was the price for his power. He said it in such a way that I couldn't believe it at first. He spoke as if it had been inevitable, as if it was part of the very ritual he had to go through to become who he was. As he began to rise within the ranks of the order, the darkness had begun to claim him in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The group had demanded a price from him, a price far steeper than any of us had realized. Gabriel had been told that to gain the gift of foresight, the ability to see the unseen, he had to offer someone close to him. The prophecy he had been chosen to deliver, the ability to perceive the world beyond the veil, could not be earned by a mere act of will. No, it demanded a sacrifice. He told me it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. To take her life. To offer Elena's blood to the dark forces that controlled everything. He never wanted it. He didn't want to make that choice. But the order had made it clear, without the sacrifice, the power would never come. Without it, he would have been just like the rest of us, ordinary. Weak. He had begged the leaders of the order, for another way. But there was no other way. He told me that the moment her life was taken, he felt the power course through him. It wasn't like anything he had ever felt before, like a surge of electricity, or a flood that washed over him and filled him with something he couldn't control. It wasn't just foresight he had gained, it was something far more insidious. Something that came with a curse. From that moment on, Gabriel's gifts had been undeniable. He saw visions, clear as day, of things yet to come. He predicted the rise and fall of men, the wars and the peace. But the cost of it all was something he couldn't escape. The darkness that had gifted him these powers also began to consume him from within. The memories of Elena's death never left him, her blood stained his hands, and he could never wash it away. Her face would haunt him in his dreams, her voice whispering in the back of his mind. He had gained everything, but in return, he had lost something irreplaceable. His own peace. His own humanity. While the rest of us embraced the power we had gained from our sacrifices, Gabriel became withdrawn, his conscience gnawing at him. The one strong prophet, the man who had seen the future so clearly, became a broken soul, tormented by the price he had paid. His foresight had given him a glimpse into the horrors of what lay ahead, but it also showed him the emptiness that awaited him in the end. Gabriel tried to warn us, but none of us listened. He could see the path we were on, the same one he had walked. He knew it was a path of destruction. But by then, it was too late for him, just as it was too late for me. In the end, Gabriel's sacrifice, his sister's life, hadn't just cost him his peace. It had cost him his very soul. The power he had gained was fleeting, and no matter how many visions he saw or how many prophecies he foretold, it never filled the emptiness left by Elena's death. His soul, bound to the darkness, could never find redemption. And so, he spiraled deeper into the abyss, unable to escape the consequences of his choices. Gabriel's downfall was inevitable. The same as mine. We both paid the ultimate price. We both made the sacrifice, and in the end, it consumed us. The power we gained was never truly ours to hold. It belonged to the darkness. And in the end, the darkness always takes what it is owed. He didn't die the way the others had, he wasn't sacrificed or tortured. No, his soul simply withered away, drained by the very forces we had once embraced. Gabriel was the last person who saw the truth, and yet, even he couldn't escape the cost. We were all lost, in our own way. And now, as I sit here, surrounded by the consequences of my choices, I wonder if he was the lucky one. Maybe he escaped the worst of it. In the end, Gabriel's death, or disappearance, or whatever you want to call it, was a warning. A reminder that no matter how far you go, no matter how much power you gain, the darkness will take what it is owed. And in the end, no one can escape it, not even the prophet who saw it all coming. You see, when you sacrifice everything for power, you believe the rewards will be endless. You become blind to the cost. The group, the order, never told me how it would end. They just showed me the way. The darkness, the rituals, the sacrifices, they led me to where I am now, where I was once above everyone else. But in the quiet corners of my mind, I began to sense something I hadn't anticipated, the emptiness. The sacrifices I made, the blood I shed, they didn't just take pieces of me, they took everything. Over time, I realized that what I had built came at a price greater than I could have ever imagined. The power I gained wasn't truly mine. It belonged to the darkness, to the forces I had invoked. And like all debts, they had to be paid. I remember the first time I felt it. It was a dull ache, a weight on my chest. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, a byproduct of pushing myself too hard. But then it didn't go away. It only grew stronger. The pain started in my body, like a slow-burning fever. It was subtle at first, a constant pressure building in my chest, a heaviness that wouldn't let go. The nightmare started. I'd wake up in cold sweats, visions of the faces of the people I had sacrificed, my family, my mother, my daughter, all staring at me with hollow eyes. Their voices would haunt me, calling out to me, accusing me of what I had done. And no matter how much I tried to push them away, they kept coming back. It was like I could feel them. All of them. Their souls, trapped, tethered to mine. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't escape it. I had given up everything, and now they were taking their due. The darkness I had invited into my life was starting to close in on me. At first, it was just a gnawing feeling, a sense that something was wrong. But as time went on, it became clear that there was no escaping the consequences of my choices. The rituals I had performed, the blood I had spilled, had left a scar on my soul, a scar that couldn't be healed, no matter how much power I amassed. I had learned too late that there is a price for everything. And mine was steep. I don't care what anyone says. You can't escape the consequences. You can't outrun them. I thought I could. But I couldn't. I had sold my soul, and now it was time to pay. The final straw came during a meeting with the guardian. He had been the one who guided me, who taught me how to rise. But that night, he looked different. His face, once kind and welcoming, was now cold, and his eyes held a dark satisfaction. He smiled at me, but it was not the smile of a mentor, it was the smile of someone who knew my time had come. I tried to argue, tried to deny what he was saying, but deep down, I knew. I knew that I had pushed too far. That there was no coming back from the price I had paid. It wasn't just my family that I had sacrificed, it was my own humanity, my soul. And it was now time for the final payment. The guardian told me that there was only one way to break free from the debt that had been accumulated over the years. But that way was too much. It was too final. I had to die. All those years spent clawing my way to the top, believing I was untouchable. Believing that nothing could harm me. But in the end, I learned the truth, you can't escape your soul's debt. And there's no amount of power that can save you. So my brother, that is how he ended it. But I can tell you that, my father went through a lot before his final demise. Which makes me believe everything in this book. And since I got hold of this book, I've not been myself. Like I said, I wanted to bring this light so that people will understand that you cannot escape the price to pay for such things when you engage in them. Thank you.
Don't forget to please subscribe, share and like our videos. Kindly hit the notification bell so you will be the first to get notification to our videos when we upload. One thing which we should all know and understand is that, even as we reflect on this story filled with deception, power, and regret, it's important to remember the one truth that is most crucial for everyone out there. Let us take a moment to reflect on the choices made, the sacrifices given, and the dark path that was chosen by this man. Power, success, wealth, these are things that many of us crave. We are told from a young age that we should strive for greatness, that the world rewards those who push hardest and sacrifice most. But I am here to tell you that there is a hidden truth behind the pursuit of power. The price is often far higher than you can imagine, and once you pay it, you can never undo it. You see, this man believed he could outsmart fate. He believed that with enough ambition, enough bloodshed, enough manipulation, he could control everything, his destiny, his wealth, his empire. And at first, he did. He rose to the top of the world, acquiring everything he ever dreamed of. But as we saw, every step he took to claim that power came at a personal cost. It's easy to think that we can control the consequences of our actions, that the things we give up, the people we hurt, won't matter in the end. But I urge you to reconsider. For the sacrifices made in the name of power, whether they are physical, emotional, or even spiritual, will weigh on you. They will leave scars that go beyond the visible. They will haunt you in ways you cannot predict. What begins as a thirst for more wealth, more influence, more control, soon turns into an insatiable hunger, one that can never be filled, no matter how much you achieve. For that is how the devil works. The truth is, every choice you make comes with a price. And sometimes that price is not paid in dollars or status. Sometimes it's paid in the lives of those you love, in the integrity you lose, in the pieces of your humanity that you willingly give up to move forward. When you make a deal with darkness, you're not just trading your soul for power, you're trading your peace, your conscience, your relationships, and perhaps even your very identity. In conclusion, this episode is a stark reminder that whatever we do in this life, we are bound to pay for it in the days ahead of us. The only thing you need to know is that God is calling you into a deeper, more intimate relationship with Him. And when you have that relationship with Him, you will be able to achieve all that you desire. Don't settle for anything less. We shall meet again in the next video. Thank you.